The man who returned for one book in the center of a small town in Laguna. There's an old library built during the American era, 2 floors, high windows fogged with age, wooden shelves tall and packed with forgotten books. Locals pass by without looking inside. The doors always appear closed. But the curtains move slightly even when there's no wind. That library belonged to Mang Isidro. He was a kind old man, quiet voice, white hair, always combed back, wore suspenders even in the heat, and knew the name of every student who came through the doors. He would say, books carry more than words, they carry memory. Every Thursday, he stayed late reorganizing shelves, labeling books by hand, humming old Kundaman songs, while the old desk lamp flickered beside him. One rainy Thursday, he didn't come home. The rain was strong, power had gone out. They found him the next morning sitting upright at his desk, eyes open, but empty, hand outstretched toward an empty spot on the highest shelf. There was no sign of struggle, just a broken pencil and a single phrase written on an old borrowing slip. I didn't finish it after he was buried. The library was locked. But odd things kept happening at exactly 7 p.m. every Thursday. The lights would flicker even though no power ran through the building. Sometimes a faint light was seen moving between the aisles, like someone carrying a lantern. Pages turned on their own, and chairs would be pulled out as if someone just stood up. One janitor said he heard the sound of chalk scratching, and when he looked, a quote had appeared on the blackboard in the reading room: return what was borrowed.
Another said he saw a figure standing by the stairs, holding a book open, flipping slowly page after page. But when he approached, the figure vanished, and the book fell to the floor. It had no title, only blank pages, except one, his own name written neatly in the middle, and a date that hadn't come yet. The story spread fast. People stopped going near the library. Children avoided walking past it. Elders started lighting candles every Thursday and leaving them on the steps. They said it helped Mang Isidro find his way because he wasn't angry, just unfinished. One day, a teenage girl found a book inside her backpack. It wasn't hers, leather-bound, handwritten, thick with dust. She opened it and saw names written in red ink. People she recognized, old neighbors, her grandfather, and then her own name. The next day she brought it to the library to return it, but the doors were locked still. The bell above the entrance rang once, and the door creaked open. She stepped in and never came out. The only thing they found was the book resting on the front desk, the page with her name now crossed out. Now people say, if you ever find a book in your house that you didn't borrow, don't read it, bring it back. Because Mang Isidro still walks the aisles, still checks the logs, and still asks the same question: did you finish it? And if you lie, hell no. The old woman who crochets at midnight in a quiet barangay in Batangas behind an old Spanish-era church. There once stood a small wooden house with peeling paint, a rusty tin roof, and a bamboo bench in front. The house belonged to Aling Petra. She was quiet, gentle, always seen with yarn in her lap, her eyes half closed. As she worked, her hands never stopped moving. She never married, no children of her own, but every child in the barangay wore mittens, scarves, bonnets, and blankets made by her. She never asked for payment. She just smiled and said, "Para sa lamig and G gabay." She always sat outside around 11 in the evening, crocheting by candlelight, even when no one passed by, even when the wind grew strong on December 23, one particularly cold year. Her candle burned out, her body was found the next morning, still seated on her bench, the yarn in her hand stretched tight between her fingers, her eyes were closed like she had simply fallen asleep after her funeral. The house was abandoned slowly, collapsing with time. The only thing left standing was the clothesline stretching across the yard. And then the strangeness began. A week before Christmas every year, someone would find a crocheted item hanging on their door, sometimes a red scarf, sometimes a child's bonnet, all made with yarn no one had seen in stores for decades. People thought it was just a kind neighbor honoring her memory, until one man burned a scarf he found, saying it gave him chills. That same night his house went cold. The baby cried non-stop. The firewood wouldn't light, and at midnight they all heard someone whispering from outside the window. Mainit Ba Anak. Another story spread about a young boy who never had winter clothes. His family was too poor to buy anything new. One morning he found a thick brown blanket folded neatly at the edge of his bed, stitched with his name on the corner. He used it every night and never got sick again. Years later, he swore he woke once in the middle of the night and saw an old woman seated by his window crocheting silently with moonlight shining through her silver hair. She never looked at him, but smiled as she tied off the last knot, then vanished. People now say if you pass by the alley behind the church during December, don't speak, don't make noise, just walk slowly, because if you hear the soft clack of a metal hook or feel something brush your fingers, it's her. And if you ever receive a handmade scarf in a brown paper wrap, keep it, because she gave it with love. But if you disrespect it, burn it, tear it, forget it, the cold will never leave your bones, and her footsteps will follow you for the rest of the winter. The man who waited by the boxes in the outskirts of Tarlac. There's an abandoned warehouse near the train tracks, no name, no signage, just dust, rust, and broken glass. But inside, at the far end near the freight doors, sit two wooden crates and an old plastic chair. Locals say if you pass by at dusk you'll see someone sitting there, a hunched figure staring at the boxes, as if waiting for something. They say it's Mang Andres. He used to work there for decades, sorting deliveries, fixing ledgers, guarding shipments. He was old when he started and older when he stayed every night. He stayed late past everyone else, counting the boxes with a flashlight and a notebook. He never took a break, never complained, just nodded. When people asked if he ever slept one night, the train came late. No one knew it was arriving. There was confusion. People panicked. Something fell from the last cart. It hit the platform hard, the crates scattered, and Mang Andres was found lying still between them, clutching his notebook. Inside were numbers and rows of tally marks, and on the last page written shakily, 2 left. They closed the warehouse weeks later. The space rotted fast. But then strange things began. Tricycle drivers who passed by late said they saw a light inside flickering like an old lamp. Some heard footsteps on the gravel and the sound of a pencil scratching slowly. A student dared to peek through the broken window, saw an old man seated beside 2 crates, one hand resting on top, the other writing nothing into a blank notebook. The man didn't look up, but the pencil stopped moving, and the student ran. The next day, the boy found an old paper in his school bag. He never placed it there. Written on it in faint pencil were the words, "Still waiting." Now people say the 2 crates were never opened. because Mang Andres believed something was missing. Some say a piece of his life is inside a secret, a mistake. Others say he's waiting for someone to come back and finish what was started, a delivery that never arrived, or maybe a goodbye that never came. Once a truck driver swore he passed by the warehouse late one night and saw the door wide open. Inside the lights were on, and a figure was standing over the crates, slowly opening them one by one. He stopped to look and saw the man's face. It was pale blank, staring straight at him through the dark. Then everything went black. When he woke up, the truck was still running, but facing the wrong direction, and in the passenger seat sat a folded note with two words, "Not yet." Now no one drives past alone at night, and if they do, they never slow down, because if you do, you might see him standing by the crates again, waiting for something only you can deliver or take away. The grandmother who read alone in a small town in Kwentong, hidden behind thick trees and rusted fences, stands a house no one has lived in for over 20 years. The windows are fogged, the front gate always locked with a single rusty chain. Yet every evening a soft light glows from the second floor. Locals say it's her Lola Sable. She was once the town's best storyteller. Every night at exactly 7, she sat on her rocking chair by the window, opened an old book, and read aloud to the neighborhood children. Fairy tales, ghost stories, legends of Dewatas, and Capre. Her voice was warm, steady, and filled with magic and fear. But one stormy night no one came. Flood warnings, power outages, roads blocked still. She waited still. She read. The next morning they found her seated by the window, her eyes closed, her hands still holding the book open to the last page, her voice silent forever. After her funeral, the house was sealed, her belongings untouched. But strange things began within weeks. Children walking home from school said they heard someone reading aloud inside the empty house, soft, slow turning of pages echoing through the street. Even when no lights were on, one boy dared to climb the gate. He peeked through the cracks in the window and saw an old woman rocking slowly, book in hand, lips moving, but no sound coming out. When he blinked, she was looking straight at him. The next day, he refused to speak for a week, just wrote the same sentence over and over. She asked me to listen. Another girl walking her dog late at night said she heard her name being whispered from the window. When she looked up, the curtain moved, and a bookmark floated down onto the sidewalk. It had her name stitched in red thread. Her grandmother had died the same month years ago. Some say Lola Sable never realized the children stopped coming. She still waits for them to sit by the window, still opens the same old book and reads, as if someone's listening. And if you walk too close to the gate during reading hour, you might feel drawn in your legs, slowing your chest, tightening, as if someone is holding your name in their mouth, waiting to read it next. Those who return home after hearing her say they have strange dreams there, sitting in a dark room surrounded by children. No one is speaking, only listening to the voice of an old woman reading stories they somehow already know. And when they wake up, there's a single page beside their bed torn from a book they've never seen, with a story about someone just like them, but with a different ending. The man in the last pew in a small town in Ilocos. There's an old stone church hidden behind a row of mango trees. Every Sunday Mass fills the pews. People light candles, offer prayers, listen to the same priest who served for years. But no one sits in the last pew. It's always left empty, even when the church is full. Locals say it's reserved not by rule, but by fear, because that's where Mang Elias used to sit. He came early every Sunday, wore a white camisa and black slacks, brought his own rosary with faded beads and a wooden cane that echoed with each step on the marble floor. He never looked around, never joined in song, just sat still, his head low, his eyes closed. Some said he prayed for forgiveness, others said he was waiting for someone who never came back. One Sunday, he didn't show up. Days passed, word spread Mang Elias had died quietly in his home, found still clutching his rosary, his cane, by the door facing the direction of the church. He was buried with barely 5 people attending. But the next Sunday, the last pew remained empty, like always. That's when strange things began. The sound of the cane tapping returned, soft but steady, heard only when the priest raised the host. Candles near the last pew often flicker, even without wind, and one time a parishioner tried sitting there. He said the air turned heavy, his heartbeat slowed, and he heard a whisper, "I was waiting for you." He never went back. A young altar boy once forgot to collect the candle plates from the back and saw someone sitting in the last pew. Thought it was an old man sleeping. He spoke quietly, "Te tapos, na po." The figure didn't move, but the candle beside him went out. The boy looked away for only a second. When he looked again, the pew was empty. Now even the priest avoids blessing that seat directly. He moves past it without a glance, and no one ever questions why. Some say Mang Elias is still waiting for the person he prayed for every Sunday. Others say he wasn't waiting for someone to return. He was asking permission to leave and never got an answer. So he comes back every week, sits alone in the same place, surrounded by prayers that never reached him. And if you sit beside him, you might hear what he's still asking: have they forgiven me yet? The old man who waited for the bell at the far end of a quiet town in Bicol. There's an abandoned train station, surrounded by weeds and silence. The tracks are rusted, the roof has collapsed in parts, the ticket booth covered in vines. But one wooden bench remains whole, facing the platform, covered by shade at all times, even in noon sunlight. That's where the old man waits. He wears a brown jacket with silver buttons and a flat cap. His eyes looking toward the track, his hands resting on a worn black suitcase. He doesn't speak, doesn't move, doesn't blink, and no one sees him arrive. He's just there when the sun starts to set and gone before midnight. They call him Lolo Ramon. He was the last station guard before the train line shut down decades ago. Every day for over 30 years, he opened the gates, swept the platform, and rang the brass bell that signaled the train's arrival. People said he never missed a day, rain or shine, flood or fire. But he didn't leave when the station closed. He stayed long after the trains stopped running, still wearing his uniform, still holding the key to a door no one used anymore. They found him one morning, sitting on the bench, still holding his suitcase, leaning slightly to the side as if he dozed off. But he never woke up. The brass bell was found beside him, cracked in half, no longer ringing after his burial. The station was sealed off. But it didn't stay quiet for long. At dusk, people walking near the trees hear the bell faint, echoing far off, even though the original one had been removed. Sometimes there's the sound of footsteps on gravel, slow, heavy like worn boots, walking across the platform toward nothing. Children say they've seen a man on the bench, eyes fixed on the empty tracks, who disappears the moment anyone blinks. A teenager once took a photo through the fence. The image showed the platform empty, but in the reflection of the broken glass window behind it, the old man was sitting staring straight into the camera. No one ever found that phone again. There are stories from old train workers who dream of being back on the tracks, hearing Lolo Ramon call out schedules that don't exist anymore. One even claimed he heard a voice say the next train will arrive shortly. Then he woke with dirt on his boots and a faint ringing in his ears. Locals now avoid the area at twilight. They say he's still waiting, not for a train, but for someone who promised to return on the very last ride and never came. Some believe it was his wife who left before the war and was never seen again. Others believe it was the passenger he failed to protect. Now he waits each evening, suitcase in hand, ready to guide the next arrival, even if no more trains are coming. But if you hear the bell while walking past, don't stop, because once someone makes eye contact with him, they say a train does arrive, but it's not headed anywhere in this world. The candle that never goes out. In the old part of Cavite, there's a narrow alley behind the cemetery where the ground is always damp, and the air carries the scent of melted wax. At the very end of that alley, there's a crumbling stone house, its windows black, its roof half-eaten by time. But always, always there's a single candle burning on the doorstep. It never goes out, not when it rains, not when typhoons pass, not even when people try to blow it out themselves. They say the candle belongs to Nane Rosa. She lived there decades ago alone. Since her children left for Manila, she was known for lighting candles every afternoon, one for each of her kids, 5 in total. She'd place them by the window and whisper their names. Then she would sit by the door, wait for the sky to turn orange, and hum lullabies they once sang as a family. But one year no one came back. One child died in a factory accident. Another was never found after a flood. The rest vanished into the noise of the city. She still lit the candles every single day, even if no one walked through her gate, even if her neighbors stopped speaking to her. Until the night she died, a neighbor noticed the window candles had gone out, and the door was slightly open. Inside they found her on her chair, a candle still burning in her hand, her eyes looking toward the doorway, as if someone had just stepped in. Since then the house has been left untouched, but the candle by the door still burns. People say if you walk by at exactly 6 in the evening, you'll see someone sitting behind the curtain, a woman's silhouette rocking gently, as if waiting for someone to knock. Children who walk near the alley feel someone gently brush their arm, like a hand checking if they've grown. Sometimes small items appear near the candle, a toy, a school ID, a button from a uniform, things that look like they belong to someone young. A tricycle driver once said he passed by late at night and saw a woman kneeling beside the candle, her back turned, her head bowed as if in prayer. He blinked and she was gone, but his passenger seat was warm, like someone had just been there. Another story tells of a man who tried to light a cigarette beside the candle. It sparked, then went out completely, but the flame on the candle remained untouched. The next day, he found his lighter melted in his pocket and smelled candle smoke for hours. Locals now warn never to touch the flame, because Nane Rosa is still waiting, not for her children, but for someone else who promised to visit and light a final candle beside hers, so she could rest. No one Knows who that someone is, but if you walk too close, the flame might flicker and follow you. And at night you'll see a shadow at your window holding a candle, gently whispering your name like a lullaby you forgot. The woman who listened to the radio in the mountains of Bengt. There's an old wooden house at the edge of a steep road, hidden by fog and surrounded by pine trees. No one lives there now. But if you walk near it after dark, you might hear music playing faintly from an old radio locals. Say it's her Aling Maria, a retired teacher who lived alone after her husband died in a mining accident. She never remarried, never left the house. She spent her days writing lesson plans in notebooks no one would read, and her nights sitting beside a dusty radio, waiting for one particular song. She told neighbors she and her husband had a promise: if he ever died, he would send her a sign through a song. Their favorite played only once in their youth, Ikaw ang Aking Mahal. She tuned the radio every night, never missed a sunset, rain or shine, and wrote down every title she heard. The house was quiet until she passed away. They found her still seated beside the radio, which was still turned on, but what shocked the villagers was the notebook beside her. It had hundreds of song titles, all in neat handwriting, except the last page. It had only one title written in trembling letters, Ikaw ang Aking Mahal, and a single word beneath it, Tapos na. Since then, strange things have happened. People walking near the road at night report hearing old Tagalog love songs, even though the air is silent. A delivery man once got stuck near the curve and swears he heard a woman's voice humming from the trees the exact melody of that same song when he returned to his motorbike. There was a torn piece of paper tucked in his jacket. It had the same title written on it in handwriting that wasn't his. A college student, exploring with friends, dared to step onto the property at dusk. They laughed when the radio turned on by itself, but froze when they heard static break into clear music. The song was playing softly even though the plug was missing. He tried to take a video, but his phone shut off when he returned home. The only thing in his gallery was a photo of a woman seated beside the radio, her face blurred, her fingers resting on the dial, and her eyes looking straight at him. Locals now believe she never really stopped waiting. She just finally heard the song and left her body. But her spirit lingers, listening carefully, watching for anyone who ignores the melody. Some say, if you hear it and walk away without stopping, the sound follows you back home. Your own radio will turn on by itself and play the song night after night until you return. And once you do, shall be waiting, not to scare you, but to ask, did you hear it too?
If you enjoyed this terrifying story, let us know in the comments below. Hit that like button to help us bring more cursed tales and dark legends to life. Don't forget to share this video with your friends, but warn them first. And if you dare, subscribe to this channel, because here in Pinoy Phobia, the horror never ends. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next cursed story, spine-chilling folklore, or true paranormal encounter from the shadows of the Philippines. Remember, some stories are meant to be heard, but others are meant to be warnings. Thank you for watching, and remember, whatever happens, don't look back.